Hello, children. Part 3 ends with Governor realizing that Evans and his friend, who came in disguised as McCleary, has taken the governor and all the officers of Oxford prison for a ride through a cleverly escape plan. Now we get to see where Evans is and what he is up to. We will continue with part 4. The fish and chips were delicious, and after a gentle stroll round the centre of Chipping Norton, Evans decided to return to the hotel and have an early night. A smart new hat concealed the wreckage of his closely cropped hair, and he kept it on as he walked up to the reception desk of the Golden Lion. It would take a good while for his hair to regain its former glories. But what the hell did that matter? He was out again, wasn't he? A bit of bad luck that, when Jackson had pinched his scissors, for it had meant a long and tricky operation with his only razor blade the previous night. But he had his good luck too, just think. If Jackson had made him take his bobble hat off, that really had been a close call. Still, old Jackson wasn't such a bad fellow. So now, having had his supper of fish and chips, and having taken a walk round the centre of Chipping Norton, Evans decides that it is now time to return to the hotel where accommodation has been arranged for him. It had been a very difficult day and he wants to have an early night. He wants to go to sleep early because he is tired. The closely cropped hair was covered with a smart new hat. And as he is walking to the reception of the Golden Lion, he keeps thinking. He thinks that now it would take some time. He always took pride in his hair, and in order to escape, he had to cut it closely. He had to closely crop his hair. And it was his bad luck that Jackson and Stevens had come to his room, checked and taken his nail scissors. And so the previous night, he was able to cut his hair only with the razor that was left behind for him to shave the next day. So on the previous day night, with the razor, he manages to cut his hair. And he had to cover it up with a bobble hat. And he was thinking that it was his good luck that Jackson never asked him to take off his bobble hat. And he thinks that he's very glad that Jackson is not such a mean fellow. One of the worst things, funny really, had been the beard. He had always been allergic to sticking plaster, and even now his chin was irritatingly sore and red. The worst part of it was having to wear a false beard to disguise as McCleary. He had always been allergic to sticking plaster, and now his chin was still sore and red because of the allergy. The receptionist wasn't the same girl who had booked him in, but the change was definitely for the better. As he collected his key, he gave her his best smile, told her he wouldn't be bothering with breakfast, ordered the Daily Express, and asked for an early morning call at 6:45 a.m. Tomorrow was going to be another busy day. So as he comes to the receptionist to collect his key, he sees that it was a different girl this time and she looked good. She was a pretty girl. He collects his key, he gives her a very sweet smile and tells her that he does not require breakfast the next day. He also orders for a Daily Express, a newspaper, and asks her to give him a call at 6:45 a.m. because he intends to leave the hotel at the morning the next day. He whistled softly to himself as he walked up the broad stairs. He had sort of liked the idea of being dressed up as a minister, dog collar and everything. Yes, it had been a jolly good idea for McCleary to wear 2 black fronts, 2 collars, but the top collar, it had kept on slipping off the black stud, and there had been that one panicky moment when McCleary had only just got his hands up to his neck in time to stop the collar springing apart before Stevens. They had got that little problem worked out all right though. A pen stuck in the mouth whenever the evil eye had appeared at the peephole. Easy. But all that fiddling about under the blanket with the black front and the stud at the back of the collar, that had been far more difficult than they had ever bargained for. Everything else had gone beautifully smoothly though. In the car, he had found everything they had promised him. Soap and water, clothes, the map. Yes, the map, of course. The Ordnance Survey map of Oxfordshire. He had got some good friends, some very clever friends. Christ. So bit by bit, we understand through the thoughts of Evans as he is walking to his room what had been the modus operandi to escape. For him, each escape was an adventure, and this time he had really enjoyed because he got a chance to dress up like a priest. But in the cell, it had been very difficult because Stevens kept peeping through the hole every time. Initially, it was 1 minute, and later on, it was 2 minutes. So it was very difficult for them to keep all the things in place, especially the collar in place, and also they had to get themselves disguised too. So he was wondering, it was very difficult. The evil eye, they calls Stevens the evil eye who had appeared at the peephole. And then later on, he had to cover himself with a blanket because he had already dressed up as, Evans had dressed up as McCleary. So everything, but then he's happy that everything went off beautifully, smoothly. And when he came out of the gates, he had found in the car whatever they had promised him. There was soap and water, clothes, and also the map of Oxford, the Ordnance Survey map of Oxfordshire, which helped him to come to this particular place, to the Golden Lion Hotel. So he's thankful that he has got great friends, clever friends, who were able to help him to escape from the prison. He unlocked his bedroom door and closed it quietly behind him, and then stood frozen to the spot, like a man who had just caught a glimpse of the Gorgon. Sitting on the narrow bed was the very last man in the world that Evans had expected or wanted to see. "It's not worth trying anything," said the governor quietly, as Evans' eyes darted desperately around the room. "I've got men all around the place." Well, there were only two really, but Evans needn't know that. He let the words sink in. "Women too. Didn't you think the blonde girl in the reception was rather sweet?" So he reaches his room, and then he opens the door and gets in and shuts the door and stands there frozen, because on the bed was seated the person he had never expected. He stands there as though he has seen a mythological creature, because seated on the bed was the governor. The governor tells him not to try anything. The governor bluffs. He has only two people there in that hotel. He has come only with two people to arrest Evans, but he bluffs that the hotel is surrounded by policemen, and he also bluffs that the receptionist there was also a policewoman. Evans was visibly shaken. He sat down slowly in the only chair the small room could offer and held his head between his hands. For several minutes there was utter silence. Finally he spoke. "It was that bloody correction slip, I suppose." "Well," the governor failed to mask the deep satisfaction in his voice, "there are a few people who know a little German." So Evans is now completely shocked that he has been found out. So he's not able to say anything and sits there with his head between his hands, and there is complete silence. Then finally he admits that it must have been the correction slip which enabled the governor to find out the location of the hotel. Governor says that there are people other than Evans who understands German. Slowly, very slowly, Evans relaxed. He was beaten, and he knew it. He sat up at last and managed to smile ruefully. "You know, it wasn't really a mistake, you see. We hadn't been able to fix up any hotel. But we could have worked that some other way. No, the really important thing was for the phone to ring just before the exam finished, to get everyone out of the way for a couple of minutes. So we had to know exactly when the exam started, didn't we?" So Evans now knows that he is completely beaten by the governor in intelligence. So he agrees to what he has done. So he says that it was not a mistake actually, that was something they could not avoid. The plan would work out only if they could get Stevens away from the cell 3 minutes before the exam got over. That is why a fake call had come and Stevens had gone to attend the phone call, assuming it was from the governor. If they had to know when the exam would get over, they had to know when the exam actually started. That is why they had called with a correction slip. And they also wanted to give the name of the hotel to Evans. "And like a fool, I presented you with that little piece of information on a plate." Well, somebody did. So you see, sir, that correction slip killed two little birds with a single stone, didn't it? The name of the hotel for me and the exact time the exam started for. The governor nodded. "It's a pretty common word." "Good job. It's a pretty common, sir, or I'd never have known where to come to, would I?" Nice name though, the Zum Golden Lion. How did you know which golden lion it was? There are hundreds of them. Same as you, Vance. Index number 313, center number 271. Remember? 6 figures. And if you take an ordnance survey map for Oxfordshire, you find that the 6-figure reference 313271 lands you bang in the middle of Chipping Norton. And so now he says that correction slip had actually served dual purpose. One, it helped them to know the hotel, and at the same time they had called to know when the exam started. When they gave the correction slip, they had already checked out the time when the exam started. The governor had told the exam board that when the exam had started, and that was to help them plan the remaining things outside the prison. Governor says golden lion is a very common term. So he was wondering how did he know which golden lion? So he says the same way. It is because of the index number 313 and the center number. So the initial instruction given by McCleary, the invigilator who had come in, who was actually a friend of Evans, had given him initial instructions to be filled in the exam paper. So those were actually clues as to where this golden lion was actually located. So in the Ordnance Survey map for Oxfordshire, 313271 was actually Chipping Norton. So that is how Evans knew which golden lion. Yeah, you're right. We had hoped you would run off to Newbury. We did. Well, that's something I suppose. That question paper, Evans, could you really understand all that German? I could hardly. Now, of course, I couldn't. I knew roughly what it was all about, but we had just hoped it would throw a few spanners in the work, sort of muddle everybody a bit. So now, Evans admits that actually the word Newbury had come in the question paper in order to confuse the governor, to mislead them to go to Newbury. The governor stood up. Tell me one thing before we go. How on earth did you get all that blood to pour over your head? Evans suddenly looked a little happier. Clever, sir. Very clever that was. How to get a couple of pints of blood into a cellar when there is none there to start off with, and when the invigilator, shall we say, gets searched before he comes in. Yes, sir. You can well ask about that, and I don't know if I ought to tell you. After all, I might want to use it particular. So the governor is now eager to know how there was so much, from where they got so much blood to pour over Evans' head. Evans is now happy that there is something that the governor does not know, has not found out himself. So he wonders whether he should reveal the secret to the governor. He tells that it was a very challenging thing that they did, especially when the invigilator himself gets frisked before he comes for the exam. And he wonders whether he has to reveal the secret to the governor, because if he reveals it, he might not be able to use that again. Anything to do with a little rubber ring for piles, perhaps? Evans grinned feebly. Clever though, wasn't it? Must have been a tricky job, sticking a couple of pines. Nah, you've got it wrong, sir. No problem about that. No? Nah, it's the clotting, you see. That's the big trouble. We got the blood easy enough. Pig's blood it was, from the slaughterhouse in Kidlington. But to stop it clotting, you've got to mix your actual blood. Evans took a breath. With 1/10 of its own volume of 3.8% trisodium citrate. Didn't know that, did you, sir? The governor shook his head in a token of reluctant admiration. We learn something new every day, they tell me. Come on, my lad. So now the governor is curious, and he asks whether all the blood had come in from the rubber ring for piles. Evans says yes, it was a clever trick. So governor wonders how they managed to keep it from clotting. Evans reveals the secret. He says that it was not difficult to get the blood. It was actually pig's blood. And then he says, he reveals that it has to be mixed with human blood with 1/10 of its own volume of 3.8% trisodium citrate. So he tells the ratio how the mixing has to be done in order to prevent the blood from getting clotted. The governor admires the ingenuity of Evans. He says that every day they learn something new from such clever prisoners. And then he wants to take Evans now. Evans made no show of resistance, and side by side the two men walked slowly down the stairs. Tell me, Evans, how did you manage to plan all this business? You've had no visitors. I had seen to that. You've had no letters. I have got lots of friends though. What's that supposed to mean? A German teacher for a start? You mean? But he was from the technical college. Was he? Evans was almost enjoying it all now. Ever check upon him, sir? God Almighty, there's far more going on than I always will be, sir. So now the governor is curious to know how Evans had planned everything, because governor himself had made sure that Evans got no visitors or no correspondence was made to him through any letters. Evans says he has got a lot of friends. Governor wonders what that means. Evans says his German teacher. Governor says that he was from the technical college. Evans tells the governor that whether they had ever tested the credentials of the German teacher who had walked into the prison. Governor realizes that there is a lot more going on behind all this. So it was a fault of the governor that he had never checked the ID or the credentials of the person who had come in to teach Evans. He just assumed that this person is from the technical college, but he was not. He was only Evans' friend, and together they had been plotting. Every time he came in to take German class, they were plotting this escape. Everything ready? Asked the governor as he stood by the reception desk. The van's out the front, sir, said the pretty blonde receptionist. Evans winked at her, and she winked back at him. It almost made his day. A silent prison officer handcuffed the recaptured Evans, and together the two men clambered awkwardly into the back seat of the prison van. So having come down, the governor checks with the receptionist whether there's a van parked in front of the hotel. She says that there is a van there. Evans smiles at her, winks at her, and she winks back, and Evans is very happy to get a response, a reaction from the pretty receptionist. Now a silent prison officer walked towards Evans and handcuffs him, and he leads Evans into the prison van. Governor, standing outside at the steps of the hotel, wishes Evans, "See you soon, Evans." He was saying farewell to Evans as though they were two friends. "Cheerio, sir. I was just wondering, I know your German's pretty good, sir, but do you know any more of these modern languages?" "Not very well, why?" Evans settled himself comfortably on the back seat and grinned happily. "Nothing really. I just happened to notice that you've got some O-level Italian classes coming up next September, that's all." "Perhaps you won't be with us next September, Evans." James Roderick Evans appeared to ponder the governor's words deeply. "No, perhaps I won't," he said. So having seated himself in the prison van, he wishes, and then he tells the governor, he asks the governor whether there is any more modern languages, any more of the modern, he knows whether any more of the modern languages. Governor says no, and then Evans comfortably seated behind on the back seat, grins happily, and asks the governor whether he would be willing to give Evans a permission to go for the O-level Italian classes, which would be starting the next September. Governor says that Evans won't be with them the next September because he intends to send Evans to the high security prison up in north. Evans, sitting at the back, says no. Perhaps he is able to say yes. Very clearly he says no, he will not be there in the prison next September. As the prison van turned right from Chipping Norton onto the Oxford Road, the hitherto silent prison officer unlocked the handcuffs and leaned forward towards the driver. "For Christ's sake, get a move on. It won't take them long to find out." "Where do you suggest we make for?" asked the driver in a broad Scots accent. "What about Newbury?" suggested Evans. So again, the governor makes the same mistake. In spite of Evans telling him that the German teacher who had come in regularly had never been a teacher, he was in fact a friend of Evans, and together they had plotted the escape plan. Now, when governor hands over Evans to the prison officer, he fails to check the credentials of the officer, who happens to be Evans' friend again, disguised as a police officer. Once again, governor falls victim to Evans' master plan to escape and will remain forever a good for a giggle governor. So with that, we come to the end of the chapter. Thank you, children.